Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Joan Woodward, and I work for Travelers, which I just said, which is one of the largest insurance companies, and domestically, certainly, in the trucking space. So we're really pleased to present to you today a TED Power Talk. It says 15 minutes on the schedule. I might go a little over. We're going to talk about Every Second Matters. And this is our brand new campaign in the last year around distracted driving. What is going on our roads, right? I mean, you guys see this every single day in your business. We see it in loss ratios, but the saddest news is in the last 50 years, we've seen an enormous spike, the largest increase in traffic fatalities in our country. So we're going to talk about that today, but first, I want to talk about the economy and what's going on around us. On Friday, we learned that GDP for the second quarter hit just over 2%. That's slightly down from the last quarter, but look at the economic growth we've been able to achieve in the last 10 years. The Federal Reserve just cut rates an hour ago. They're a little bit worried about potential recession in the country, but I will tell you, in our businesses, we are seeing, and I'm sure you are too, growth is still continuing to be robust. So we'll see how long that can last. Unemployment rate is at historic lows. So again, the Fed watches this quite closely. We're at 3.7%. The only other times in the history in the last 70 years that unemployment was between 2 and around 3%, which is basically considered full employment, was these general times at the end of some of these wars. So unemployment is looking good. What about wage growth? You're seeing wage growth exceed the unemployment rate for the first time in a decade. So last fall, in November, there's the unemployment rate I just showed you. Wage growth, the growth annualized year over year, has exceeded the unemployment rate. So you're seeing that also in your businesses with how much wages you're going to have to pay. We clearly know that driver shortages out there for you is kind of your number one issue, number two issue, and driver training. And so we watch this closely, and you do too, I'm sure, wage growth exceeding the unemployment rate. So finally, we're starting to see an uptick. We'll see if the Congress can get their act together. I live and work in Washington, D.C., whether or not they are going to raise the federal minimum wage. I don't think they will. I don't think Trump would sign it. But certainly the states are doing it. A lot of cities are doing it, as you've seen. So let's talk about distracted driving. I just wanted to give you a backdrop that the economy is still strong from our perspective, and the unemployment rate, we think, is in check. We'll see how fast the Fed moves to cut more on the rate side. But from our perspective, the economy is still really quite robust. Consumer spending is up. And we're also driving more. So in 2018, projections are now that about 37,000 people lost their lives on US roads. Again, this was a fastest fatality increase we've seen in the last 50 years. So historic trends, this is obviously in the 1970s. We had 50,000 people die on our roads in the 1970s before the seatbelt law was made a national law. And then we had this downturn, you see, in fatalities on our roads. That's mostly because of the recessionary period we had in 2007 through about 2010. We had a very significant decrease in traffic fatalities. What happened in 2007? Besides the Great Recession, is the iPhone, the advent of mass production and consumer demand for our cellular phones. So then we've seen an uptick in the last several years. This is very disturbing for our business, for your business. Your drivers are seeing people all over the roads every minute of the day, on their phones, eating, drinking, doing lots of things. We're going to talk about what we see them doing. But miles driven are also up, as you know, very well know in your businesses. So another thing we've seen, and we're very worried about, is pedestrian fatalities. I'm sure you've seen this. This is a toxic mix of a driver rolling down the road on their cell phone, coupled with a pedestrian trying to cross their road also on their cell phone. Earbuds are in. And you have that toxic mix, which is really causing a spike in fatalities. The last time we've seen such a spike, again, was during the seatbelt laws. So about 6,000 pedestrians died in the last year on our roads. National seatbelt use, I think this is quite interesting. It's kind of leveled off. Right now we're at about 90% of Americans are wearing seatbelts. So half of all traffic fatalities, half of that number I just gave you earlier, 50% of the people who died in crashes did not wear their seatbelt. 50% of fatalities, those people did not have seatbelts on. So we still have the 10% of the population we're working on, but it has kind of leveled off. Insurance losses have increased, and I'm sure you've seen this in your book as well. Personal auto has been a problem for a number of years in terms of profitability for us. This is combined ratios, which we look at. And then commercial auto has also been problematic for our industry for a number of years. So again, loss trends are up in terms of auto loss ratios. So what did travelers decide? We looked at all of our data, and we're very good at slicing and dicing our data. And we decided this is a big enough epidemic in our country to try to make a difference. We know AT&T and some of the mobile carriers have It Can Wait and some of the other campaigns out there. We thought we'd kind of flip it on its head and say, we know a lot of people think they're not the problem, right? That I'm a safe driver, I'm very conscientious. So I have a 16-year-old, I have 4 kids that are driving now. And I tell them all the time, I'm sure you're pretty good. You're fantastic at texting and driving. But guess what? Assume that everyone else on the road is really, really bad at it, right? So we're trying to flip it. Instead of saying, you put your phone down, we're trying to say to people, it's everyone else on the road who is a bad driver while texting or while eating. So we're trying to change the social stigma, trying to change this. Remember in the 1980s when we had the designated driver? Everyone was drinking back then. All of a sudden realized we could have designated drivers. In today's world, we call that Ubering, right? A lot of our teenage kids in their 20s, and people are nodding their heads, they just take an Uber. So it's unacceptable in today's society to drink and drive. It is unacceptable. People look at you at a party and say, well, you're not driving, right? So we want to change the norms out there to say, well, you're not going to drive home distracted, right? And there is no social norm around this is unacceptable behavior in a society. So we're trying to change that. We partnered with the actual professor at Harvard who started the notion of designated drivers while drinking. He's the one who went to Hollywood and said to Cheers, remember the sitcom Cheers? Well, Cheers had a poster around designated driver. And when Norm would get up, how many people are shaking their heads? Remember Norm, the postman? We knew he wasn't driving. We knew he was off duty and he could walk home, right? So changing the social norms around distracted driving is going to take us a long way, but we're not there yet. So increasing situational awareness, exploring new technologies. We certainly know in your companies, you have tons of technologies for your drivers, and we are assuming that everyone in this room understands how to implement and, of course, adapt your drivers. You're training your new drivers how to use that technology, so it is a second wind to them. But not a lot of other people on the roads think of it this way as you do. So we wrote a white paper, a conversation starter called Every Second Matters. And we also developed this series of videos. And I want to play this one for you now because our company really felt it was important to tell the unfinished stories of a lot of the people that we've met along the way talking to these advocacy groups. Remember MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving? There's not a lot of advocacy groups around distracted driving. So we sought out to change that. So I'm going to play a little video for you.
My dad, Howard, was a self-taught carpenter. But when he walked into this studio, this workshop, he became an artist. Every morning, from as young as I can remember, he would be in the shop, building pieces of furniture, creating things. He really had a vision. In the middle of the night, we got a phone call. My dad was driving home from work, and he pulled over on the side of the road to secure a tarp on his truck. And a distracted driver who was programming her GPS swerved out of her lane and hit him. It was just devastating. Everything in my body just said this was so preventable. I was pregnant with Evie, the first grandchild that my dad never got to meet. She loves to draw, And every day I think about my dad and how I imagine he would bring her into his workshop and invite her to work on a project with him. I think he would have loved to do that.
Recalculating. Continue.
Let's pass the time, me and you and me. Let's pass the time, just you and me. There's never ever been two friends quite like we. Let's pass the time, just you and me. We'll go where the wind will take us, see what we can see. Let's have adventures, you and me. You're my best friend, and I'm yours too. Through thick and thin, whether it's gray skies or blue, we've got a love, and it's never gonna end. Ooh, you're my best friend. Let's be together, me and you and me. Let's be together, you and me. There's no other place I know that I would rather be. Let's be together, you and me. There's no other place I know that I would rather be. Let's be together, you and me. Ooh, you're my best friend.
So this is just one of our videos we have. We have a whole series of them, and we encourage you to share this with your employees, share this with your families. We're also doing symposiums around the country with high schools, with colleges, and we're taking it on the road to really try to raise awareness. We've been invited to a number of events on Capitol Hill and other places, again, working with legislatures to raise awareness on this issue. So another thing we do at the Travelers Institute, which is our public policy operation, we do a lot of polling of Americans and seeing about what they think. So consumers admit to risky technology-related distracted driving behaviors. This poll was taken of about 10,000 people in the last couple months. So of those who admit this, 44% say they do text and email while driving. 23% of us say we do check our social media. 22% say we make videos and Snapchat and other things. And a shocking 15% of us are shopping online while we're driving. We're shopping, we're buying things, we're hitting the send button on Amazon. 77% of drivers said they take calls and make calls. And again, unlike your drivers, we hope, I'm sure your drivers are doing this in a safe way with headsets, and they have to be in communications with your headquarters and your dispatchers all the time. But 77% of Americans say they're doing this constantly. 31% of drivers said they've had a near miss or a crash because of their own distractions. Because of their own distractions. That's a third of us driving out there on the roads admit that. So they're admitting this in a poll. Think about what the real number is, right? We know it's dangerous. Why do we do it? This is from the University of Pennsylvania, some research we've funded. A present bias. We tend to weigh immediate benefits more than bigger benefits in the future. One of the emergency room doctors we work with came up and he gave a keynote speech and he said, a guy came in, really, really bad, horrible car accident that was his fault. He hit another car. And he said, my girlfriend was texting me. I had to answer her. And the doctor just looked at him and said, don't you think your girlfriend would have loved to have you not have this huge car accident, which actually there was a fatality in the other car. So we think those immediate benefits are much more important than the longer term future. Social distance, the compulsion to respond to a message, much stronger if we're emotionally connected to the messenger, even if the risk of this is higher. So you see your son or daughter calling you, or your wife, you don't want to get in trouble because she might want you to bring home something from the store, right? Recency bias. If we've completed that trip to work hundreds of times while talking on the phone or texting, the risk is not that real, right? Because we've done it hundreds of times. So that 101st time is at the same probability. Overconfidence. We may think we're better drivers than everyone else on the road. This is our research. We've seen everyone think they're a better driver than everyone else on the road. Social norms. Because it's acceptable. How many times do you speak up to a distracted driver in your own car? Remember the kids in the back seat would tell us to put our seatbelts on? Remember this in the 1970s and 80s? I was one of those kids yelling at my mom and dad. I learned in school, you have to put your seatbelt on. Remember? We would harshly talk to people in the car to tell them to put their seatbelts on, damn it. My husband will ride sometimes without a seatbelt. I mean, I want to get out of the car and say, I'm not riding with you because you're going to projectile and hit me. So social norms, folks, this is a real problem in our society because we're so accepting of it, right? We're just so accepting of it. And there's so many people on YouTube and Snapchat out there. You've seen it where they're on their Snapchat and they put that little marker on how many miles per hour they're going, right? You do it on an airplane. I don't know. I don't do this stuff. My kids tell me. But all the research we've done shows that people think it's okay to do it because they're getting away with it. And they're not seeing people have these dramatic accidents that we've been talking about. Okay, so company liability policy and impact. Collisions involving large trucks increased in 2017. Fatal crashes are up with large trucking companies, 10%. Injury crashes are up 5%. Property damage are up 3%. But look at that number on the left. Fatalities up 10% with large trucking. Leading cause of work-related fatalities, motor vehicle-related transportation, still the number one. The big pie chart there on the right, 36% of all work-related fatalities happen in a car or truck. Costliest work-related injury claims, motor vehicles, the top red bar, $75,000, that's on average. We know in your business, it's a lot higher. Distracted driving policies, there's a disconnect out there between what employers think they're doing. Does your company have a distracted driving policy? Among corporate CEOs and business owners, of course we do, 71%. We have a distracted driving policy. Go look it up. Go look at that manual on the shelf, right? 71% of business owners say they have a distracted driving policy. We asked people, regular people who have regular jobs, does your company, does your employer have a distracted driving policy? 59% said no. 17% were unsure if their company actually had a policy on distracted driving. Only 24% said they think there's a policy. Yeah, there's a policy on distracted driving. We didn't even ask, we didn't even bother to ask, do you know what that policy is? Is it hands-free? So there's a disconnect between what you think you're doing and telling your employees to do and what employees actually do. And again, this is overall. These stats are not just trucking industry. These are overall employer-employee. Employer policies regarding distracted driving. So pull over if an employee needs to use their phone to make calls or texts. 53% of employers say they want their employees to pull over. We know that's not feasible in your industry, right? Prohibit use of a handheld device while driving. 50% of employers say you're required to use the Bluetooth. Again, we know that's true in your industry. Check directions with said GPS before employee begins to drive. 42% employers said they have that policy. Use voice-activated commands while employee is driving. Boss made me do it. Reasons for work communications while driving. So this is overall in employees. 45% believe they always need to be available. Remember the days we didn't have Blackberries and we didn't have cell phones and we had weekends? Remember those days we had a Saturday and a full Sunday with our family? Now it's 24/7. Everyone expects you to be available all the time. Of course, people really don't want to upset their employer. So if you're the employer, make it easier for people to say, I can't talk now. Or if you're going to change the route on me, you're going to change the load on me, let me pull over. Maybe it's not feasible, but if we talk more about it in our businesses, we think we're more likely to save a few lives. Maybe not every life, but 20% of the people we surveyed said their boss is going to be upset if I don't answer, so I'm going to answer. They don't want to lose their jobs. This, again, is generic. This is not for the trucking industry, but just our polling. What can managers do to prevent distraction? Again, speaking up is a really, really good start. If you haven't had a discussion with your employees, with your company in the last 6 months, do it. So if you haven't noticed what this is activating your do not disturb while driving. We all have those personal cell phones. This happens to be just the Apple, the iPhone, but activate that automatically on your iPhone and your family. Grab your wife's cell phone, your kids. I've done this in my family. It makes a huge difference if that little ding doesn't happen every now and then when I'm driving. So activate it automatically. When I get to my destination, I actually look at my phone. And folks, I've been doing this at Travelers. I've been running the Travelers Institute for 10 years. Just last year, I activated my do not disturb while driving. And I only activated for text messages, because again, I have 4 kids. So they can text message me and they'll get that little notice back. It'll go back to them and they'll say, your mother is driving right now. I've tailored it for each kid. So when someone texts me, they'll know your mother's driving. I will text you when I get off the highway or I get to my destination or whatever. If they need me, they know they can call me because I have allowed calls to come in, but I've blocked all my texts. It's changed my life. It's changed my life. It changes how I've reacted in my car. And you think maybe you're at a red light. Oh, I could check my text at a red light. By the time you check your text and it turns green, your mind is still on that text. So we also partner with public television. We have a 3 seconds behind the wheel documentary. It's streaming on Amazon Prime right now. So go on Amazon Prime, shoot it out to all your employees, look at it yourself. It's shocking. It's a shocking look. So thank you for your time. It was delightful to be here, and I hope you all will really take this back to your companies. I know it's an integral part of your business, so I appreciate your time.